The moment I stepped off that rattling bush plane, it felt like I'd entered another world. The sky was pitch black at 3 in the afternoon, and it would stay that way. Not for hours, but for months. 65 days without the sun. Just cold, crushing darkness. I told myself this was perfect. Isolation, no distractions. The kind of atmosphere a writer dreams of. I came to finish my novel, to disappear into the silence. But the silence wasn't empty. The snow didn't crunch like it should. It groaned like something ancient shifting beneath it. The air had this strange metallic taste, like I was breathing in blood and iron. And the townsfolk? They stared too long, too still. Eyes wide, no smiles. No hellos, just watching. As I grabbed my duffel and turned toward the only road out of the airstrip, I saw a little girl in a red coat standing beside a snowbank. No gloves, no breath in the freezing air. She looked right at me and whispered, "Don't listen to the lights." Then she vanished into the shadows. That was my welcome. I should have turned around right then, but I didn't. And now I can't forget what I saw. The lodge looked like it had been standing since before Alaska was even a state. A warped skeleton of wood and frost-bitten stone, groaning with every gust of wind like it resented still being upright. The sign above the door read Sable Hollow Inn, half frozen and barely hanging on. There were no lights in the windows. Just a faint orange flicker of a fire somewhere deep inside. The door creaked open before I could knock. She was already waiting. The lodge keeper was thin and hunched, with long gray hair tied in a loose braid and eyes so cloudy I couldn't tell where she was looking. But somehow I still felt seen. She didn't ask my name, just handed me a rusty key and whispered, "Room 3. As I turned to go, she grabbed my wrist with bony fingers. "You'll hear them," she said, her voice a rasp. "Don't answer. Don't follow." I nodded, uncomfortable, and chalked it up to local folklore, probably a ploy to spook tourists. Except there were no other tourists. I was the only guest. That night the wind died completely. No rattling glass. No tree branches against the roof. Just silence, until I heard it tap, tap, tap. 3 precise knocks on the window behind the bed. I froze, heart hammering in my throat. The curtain fluttered slightly, though there was no draft. I stood up slowly, every instinct screaming not to. But I had to look. Had to prove to myself it was nothing. I pulled the curtain aside. No one was there. Just the deep black of the polar night pressing up against the glass, thick and endless. The snow below the window was undisturbed, smooth, clean, perfect. No footprints, no sign of life. I locked the window, drew the curtain shut, and sat back on the bed trying to steady my breath. Then it came again. Tap, tap, tap. But this time, it was on the opposite wall. There was no window there. Just the closet. I didn't open it. I didn't move. I just lay back in the dark, eyes wide, pretending sleep would come. Outside, or maybe inside, the tapping continued, patient, steady, like someone waiting for me to respond. By day, if you could call it that, I wandered the town, trying to get a sense of the place. There were maybe 30 houses, a shuttered diner, a half-collapsed church, and a general store that never seemed open. Everything was wrapped in a heavy silence, broken only by the occasional creak of wood or the crunch of my boots in the snow. The strangest part? Every window I passed was boarded from the inside. Thick planks nailed across the glass like they were trying to keep something out. Or maybe in, and the people, if I saw them at all, and they were quick to vanish. Curtains tugged shut. Doors closed without a sound. No one spoke to me. No one even looked me in the eye. By the 3rd day, I noticed a pattern. After 6 p.m., the streets emptied completely. No footsteps, no dogs. Not even the hum of generators. Just a town swallowed whole by its own fear. Then came the fog. It rolled in without warning. Thicker than anything I'd ever seen. A wall of pale gray swallowing the trees and houses until even my hands felt far away. I stood outside just past the lodge porch, mesmerized. That's when I heard it. My voice. Faint. Echoing from the woods. "Looks like a good place to disappear," it said. That was something I'd muttered to myself on the first day. Then again. "Closer, this air tastes like metal," another phrase I'd spoken. But this time it didn't sound curious. It sounded hungry, and then I saw them. Small flickers of light bobbing gently between the trees. At first I thought they were lanterns, maybe other travelers, but they moved too smoothly, too high. And there were no footsteps in the snow. They began drifting closer. I stepped forward without realizing, like something inside me needed to follow. Then a hand yanked me back. The lodgekeeper stood behind me, her eyes wide with terror. "Don't follow," she hissed. "They mimic. That's how they get close. That's how they become." "Become what?" I whispered. She shook her head. "You. They wear your skin next." The lights paused at the edge of the fog, then vanished. I stopped sleeping around the 5th night. Not on purpose, I just couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt watched. Not like someone was in the room, more like something inside me was waking up the moment I tried to rest. The shadows started changing first. I'd pass by the hallway mirror and see my silhouette lagging behind me, just a second too late, like it had forgotten the timing. Once I caught it smiling when I wasn't. That was the last time I looked at my reflection without flinching. I started keeping a journal, a way to anchor myself. And I brought an old tape recorder to dictate passages for my novel. It helped for a while. Until the night I hit play on a blank tape, my voice crackled through the speaker. "The sun is never coming back. Let me in." I froze. I'd never said those words. Not out loud. Not even in thought. But it was undeniably my voice, same cadence, same tone. And the last part, it sounded like I was standing just outside the window. I didn't sleep that night either. The next day, a man I'd seen once in the general store, tall, bearded, red flannel, was gone. I asked the store clerk if he knew where he'd gone. He just blinked at me. "Who?" I described him in detail. But the clerk just kept ringing up my items like I hadn't spoken. "He was real," I muttered. No one looked at me. No one ever did anymore. That night I sat at my desk facing the window, staring into the dark. I saw myself. Not a reflection, me. Standing outside in the snow, head tilted, eyes hollow, grinning. A perfect copy. Waving. I backed away slowly, heart thundering. When I looked again, a nothing. But the next morning, there were 2 sets of footprints in the snow outside my window. Mine and someone else's. Identical. I didn't remember going outside. I started to wonder, what if I'd already been replaced? What if I was just a placeholder now, waiting to collapse so something else could take over? And worse, what if it already had? I couldn't take it anymore. The whispers, the sleeplessness, the feeling that something was pressing its face against the inside of my skin. That night, when the lights flickered at the edge of the trees again, I decided to end it, or at least face it. I slipped my flare gun into my coat pocket and stepped into the snow. The cold hit like needles, but the lights pulled me forward. They always had. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. No wind, no crunch of snow under my boots. Just the glow of those pale orbs drifting between the trees like will-o'-the-wisps. Each time I thought I'd caught up, they'd retreat a little farther, teasing me, leading me. Until finally I saw it. A shape ahead, sagging under decades of rot. An old trapper's cabin hidden deep in the forest. The door creaked open without my touch. Inside, it smelled like wet wood and rust. Every inch of the walls was lined with photographs. Visitors, families, strangers. Their faces all violently scratched out, leaving only gouged paper where eyes and mouths should have been. My stomach lurched. In the corner stood a tall, dust-coated mirror. I approached it, gripping the flare gun like a lifeline. My reflection stared back, pale and hollow-eyed. But behind me, something moved, tall, thin. Its eyes glowed faintly like embers under ice. I spun around. Nothing. Turned back to the mirror. The figure was closer now, its head tilted, its fingers too long, stretching toward my shoulder. I ran. Out the door, into the trees, branches clawing at my face. But the woods didn't end. No matter which way I turned, I found only more black pines and drifting lights. Then I heard it, my own voice. Come back, from behind me, then ahead. Come back, louder, faster. Dozens of me calling at once, I fired the flare into the sky. The red glow burst above, drenching the clearing in bloody light. And there, surrounding me in a perfect circle, stood figures. Dozens of them. Motionless, their faces hidden, their eyes glowing faintly like coals. Each one was me, waiting. I woke up face down in the snow, my hands stiff and blue, my lips split and bleeding. The sky above was still endless black, but my watch said 3 days had passed. I didn't remember walking back. I didn't remember anything after the flare. Just fragments, trees folding in on themselves, voices layered over my own, a circle of faces with my eyes. The townsfolk said they found me screaming at the sky, clawing at the air like I was trying to pull something off me. They wrapped me in blankets, gave me hot tea, but they wouldn't meet my eyes. Not once. I left the next morning, frostbitten and hollow, dragging my suitcase down the frozen airstrip. The bush plane's propellers cut through the silence like a blade. No one waved goodbye. No one watched me leave. On the flight back, I scrolled through my phone, desperate to anchor myself to reality. That's when I saw it, a photo I never took. Me sleeping lit by the dim lodge lamp, shot from outside my window. The timestamp, the first night. In the reflection of the glass just behind me, something was smiling. I haven't seen the sun since. It's still out there. I don't know where or what it really is, but I know it hasn't left. I can feel it watching. Even now, especially now. People think it's the cold that kills you out here. It's not. It's the darkness. The way it stretches, wraps around you like it knows you, like it wants you. I came here to be alone. I thought I needed that. Thought if I just got far enough away from the noise, the grief, the memories, I could finally breathe again. So I found this old cabin, tucked deep in the Alaskan wilderness where the sun doesn't rise for weeks during the polar night. No neighbors, no roads, just stillness and silence. The first few days were peaceful, quiet, even comforting. I read, let the cold numb everything. But the thing about silence, it gives other things space to speak. And soon I started hearing things. Things that weren't wind or wolves. I didn't believe in the dark, not like this. Not until the lights stopped working. Not until I saw what was standing just beyond the tree line. Not until the cabin started to change. God, I should have never come here. After my brother died, I stopped answering calls. I stopped answering everything. I couldn't write, couldn't think. Grief doesn't just settle in your chest, it seeps into your bones. People told me to heal, to move on. But how do you move on from someone who was half your soul? So I did the only thing that made sense. I vanished. Found an online listing for a winter cabin way up north. No cell towers, no neighbors, no distractions. Just darkness, snow, and silence. I told a few people I was going on a retreat, but I didn't really plan on coming back. The place was beautiful in a rugged, almost cruel way. The wooden beams groaned with every gust of wind. The windows were double-paned, frosted at the corners. Inside, a wood-burning stove sat center like a heart, thumping warmth into the space. The sun had already dipped for the season. Up here, the nights stretched for weeks. That was the point. For a while, it worked. The world was quiet. I wrote a little, drank tea by the fire, watched shadows flicker on the walls. The dark wrapped around the cabin like a heavy blanket, but then things shifted. One morning, I went to grab my flashlight. It was gone. I swore I'd left it by the front door. Thought maybe I moved it in a fog, but when I searched every drawer, every pocket of my bag, it wasn't there. That night, I heard scratching on the wall outside. Slow, deliberate. I told myself it was a branch in the wind. The next morning, one of my boots was missing from the porch. Just one, the left. The right sat alone in the snow like a warning. I laughed it off. Nervous, uneasy laughter. Told myself I was tired. Isolated. The mind plays tricks when there's no one to keep it grounded. But deep down I felt it, like a thread unraveling behind my ribs. Something wasn't right. Something small but loud in the silence, and the strange thing, it didn't feel like I was alone anymore. It felt like something had been waiting, watching me unpack, watching me settle in, watching me from the moment I stepped inside. Time doesn't move the same in endless night. You blink and it's tomorrow. Or maybe it's still yesterday. I stopped checking the clock after the third day. It didn't matter. The only rhythm left was the sound of my own breathing and the soft creak of the cabin settling under snow. But the dark was getting heavier. I kept my lantern burning as long as I could. I rationed the fuel, counted the batteries like gold coins. I tried the solar light every day, setting it by the window even when the sky was cloudless and still. But it never charged, not once. It just sat there, cold and dead like everything else out here. That's when the candle started acting up. I'd light one, watch the flame flicker high, then vanish in a hiss, like it had been pinched by invisible fingers. No draft, no breeze, just that same cold silence, and every time the lights went out I felt it. That creeping awareness, a shift in the air, like something had moved closer. Not outside, inside. The first time I found the footprints I thought they were mine. Muddy prints trailing through the kitchen, circling the table once, then stopping by the bedroom door. But they didn't match my boots. Too long, too narrow, and barefoot. I cleaned them up without thinking. My hands were shaking. I told myself I'd tracked something in and was overreacting. But then it happened again, and again, always the same time, after the lights failed right before the whispers started. Every single night. At first it was just my name, soft, curious, almost childlike. Then came the breathing, slow, heavy, as if right beside my ear. I'd snap on the lantern and whip around, nothing. But the feeling never left. I stopped sleeping. I couldn't. I'd sit in the corner with the last working flashlight pointed at the center of the room, waiting for the battery to die. Watching the shadows stretch just a little too far. I wasn't sure what was worse anymore, the darkness itself or what waited for it. Because whatever this was, it didn't like the light. But the light wouldn't stay. The first time I saw them, I thought my mind had finally cracked. I'd been staring at the tree line for hours, rocking in the chair by the frosted window, waiting for dawn that would never come. Snow fell in slow, soundless sheets. Then between the pines, something moved. They were tall, too tall, thin like smoke, but solid enough to cast shadows where no light should be. Their heads bent at strange angles, and though the distance blurred them, I could see their eyes, small glimmers of pale green in the black. Watching, always watching. I shut the curtain and sat back, pressing my palms to my face. When I finally looked again, they were gone. That night, the front door creaked open with a long, slow moan. My stomach dropped. I'd locked it. I knew I had. All the windows were sealed. Yet the door stood ajar, snow drifting across the threshold. Nothing outside but darkness. Nothing inside but me. I slammed it shut and pushed the heaviest furniture I had against it. Table, chair, even the wood box. My hands were trembling so hard I could barely hold the hammer as I boarded up the windows. The moment the last plank went up, I heard it. Laughter. Soft at first, then rising, a horrible, familiar sound. It was my own voice. Laughing outside the walls, I pressed my ear to the wood. The laugh turned to a whisper, repeating a word I couldn't make out. My heart beat so hard it hurt. Later, while searching for anything, any explanation, I found a journal under a loose floorboard. The pages were warped with damp, the handwriting jagged and frantic. Most of it was unreadable, but one line scrawled over and over again burned into my brain. Don't let the dark see you. It remembers. I sat on the floor, clutching the book like a lifeline, and for the first time since I arrived, I wanted to scream, because whoever left that warning had known. They'd seen these things too. And if they were right, it wasn't just the dark outside anymore. It had found its way in, and it remembered me. The cabin started to rot from the inside out. I don't mean mold or damp wood. I mean something deeper, like the structure itself was giving up. The walls sagged. The floorboards groaned beneath my feet even when I stood still. The fireplace, once my only warmth, burned but gave no heat. I'd sit in front of the flames and still feel my breath fog in the air. And the shadows, they no longer waited for nightfall. They stretched in directions that made no sense, slinking up walls, curling around corners, pulsing with something alive. Sometimes they moved even when the light didn't. I decided to leave. I didn't pack, didn't plan. I just ran. But when I got outside, the snowmobile was gone. Vanished. No tracks. No sign it had ever been there. I tried walking. Compass in hand, head down. I walked straight, swore on it. But every time after what felt like an hour, I ended up right back at the cabin. Time twisted. Some days lasted a blink. Others stretched like an eternity. I'd wake up to find my fingernails grown out, my beard longer. Then I'd blink and it was like no time had passed at all. My mind began to fray. Then it spoke. Not in words at first, but in feelings, deep bone-level impressions. Stay, surrender, be still. When I resisted, it responded in whispers that coiled around my thoughts. It offered two things, release or madness. I stopped eating. Couldn't stomach anything. All I had left was a single wax candle and my old cassette recorder, the kind I used for writing ideas. I clung to them like relics of a dying world. I'd talk into the recorder, trying to anchor myself with my own voice. But sometimes when I played the tape back, it wasn't just me speaking. Sometimes it finished my sentences. The candle, my last bit of light, burned lower with every hour. I watched it constantly. The flame danced like it knew it was being hunted. I started praying, not to God but to the flame. I no longer feared the dark. I understood it. It didn't want to kill me. It wanted to keep me. Strip away the noise until I was nothing but silence, a part of it. Forever. They found me huddled beneath a collapsed porch, half buried in snow, frostbitten to the bone. My skin was pale blue. My eyes, they said, looked like they'd seen something no one should ever see. I didn't speak. Not a word. Not even when they asked how I survived or what happened to the others, though there were no others. Just me. The hospital lights felt too bright. Too artificial. I kept my face turned to the wall, muttering things under my breath, clutching the old cassette recorder they pulled from my coat. They played the tape. Static, low and sharp. Then breathing, ragged, slow, mine, then not mine. Something deeper, layered beneath. And then the voice, "You left the light on too long." Just that. Whispered like a secret. Or a warning they assumed I cracked. Said the cold broke my mind. But I know better. The dark didn't break me. It chose to let me go. Or maybe it let me bring something back in the cabin. It's gone now, buried beneath 6 feet of ice and silence. But sometimes the rescue team hears things, scratches under the snow, and once, a laugh that wasn't theirs. I used to think darkness was the scariest part of the polar night. I was wrong. It was the silence. The way it pressed against my skin like a weight, the way it waited, patient and listening. Even now, months later, I can still hear it when I close my eyes. I'd taken the job thinking it would be easy money. 3 months at a research outpost no one cared about. A few climate readings, a few lonely nights, and a paycheck big enough to erase my debts. I told myself I could handle the dark. The first days were uneventful. Steel walls humming with generators, the hiss of my own breath echoing back at me. Outside, endless black stretched across frozen tundra where the sun had vanished for the season. I'd stare out the narrow window and imagine it was just night, like any other night back home. But there's a difference between darkness you know will end and darkness that swallows the horizon without promise. Then came the silence. At first it felt clean, almost holy, but after the third storm cut off all contact, I started to sense it wasn't empty at all. Something was out there waiting, whispering my name. When I first signed the contract, I didn't even read the fine print. All I saw was the payout. 3 months alone in the Arctic during the polar night. Hazard pay, isolation bonus, a lump sum big enough to wipe the slate clean. I figured, how bad could it be? Just me, a few data logs, a frozen horizon, quiet, solitude, maybe even peace. In Anchorage, before the last leg of the trip, I grabbed coffee at a local diner. When I told the waitress where I was headed, she just stared. Then she said something that stuck with me. The dark doesn't come alone up there. I laughed it off, said I'd bring a flashlight. She didn't smile. The ride out was all endless white and gnawing wind. By the time the pilot dropped me off near the tree line, the sun was already a rumor on the edge of the horizon. I hiked the last half mile to the station. That's when I saw them. Arrangements of small bones in the snow. Bird skulls, tiny femurs laid in spirals. I told myself it was foxes or wolves. Natural behavior. I had to believe that. The station itself was a steel box anchored to permafrost. Inside it smelled like old paper and diesel. Functional, sterile. I unpacked quickly, trying not to think about how far I was from the next human. Days passed quietly. I ran equipment checks, logged data, kept to a schedule. But then small things started going wrong. My wrench disappeared from the workbench, only to reappear 3 days later on the roof. One night, the generator cut out for no reason. Static crept into the satellite feed, just a low hiss that made the hairs on my neck stand up. And at night I started feeling it. A presence. Like the darkness wasn't just surrounding the station but peering in, watching. I checked the cameras. Nothing. I checked again. Still nothing, but I couldn't shake the sense that something had noticed me, that I wasn't as alone as I'd told myself I'd be. When the last sliver of sun disappeared for good, something shifted. Not in the world, in me. Like I'd stepped off the map into a place where the rules didn't apply anymore. By the third week, time had lost its edges. Without daylight, days bled into nights until everything felt like one long, unbroken hour. I told myself I was fine. Kept my routines, made notes, even talked aloud just to hear a voice. But then the silence started to feel heavier, like it was pressing me down. That's when I heard it for the first time. It was faint at first, a thread of sound unraveling at the edge of the wind. Not a howl or a groan, too measured for that. More like whispering. I froze at my desk, straining to hear through the steel walls. My name? It couldn't have been. I laughed at myself, but the sound died in my throat. I checked the perimeter cameras. Every screen showed black, flickering static just for that exact minute. When it cleared, nothing moved outside. Just snow and darkness. Sleep became impossible. The whispering came more often, sometimes circling the station like footsteps on fresh snow. One night I woke standing at the door, my hand on the latch, ready to step out into the frozen dark. My breath fogged the glass. I didn't remember leaving my bed. I slammed the door shut and locked it twice. My heart wouldn't slow down. The next morning, the radio was dead. No signal, no static, just dead air. I tore the panel apart and found nothing wrong. I even climbed onto the roof to check the antenna, but the sky above me was endless black, stars swallowed by shifting clouds. It was only then, kneeling in the snow, that I realized how quiet it had become. No wind, no generator hum, no sound at all except for the faintest whisper right behind me. I spun around. Nothing. Back inside, I tried to steady my breathing, but the station felt smaller, like the walls had drawn closer overnight. I sat at the table and whispered my own name, just to prove it still belonged to me. And in the silence, something whispered it back. The whispers started using my name more clearly now. Not just once or twice, but in full sentences. Come out, we're waiting. It's better out here. You're not alone. Always soft, always just outside the range of certainty. I'd press my ear to the door and swear I could hear someone mimicking my voice from the other side, like an echo warped in ice. I hadn't slept in 2 days. My thoughts felt slushy, sliding in directions I didn't want them to go. Protocol said never open the door during isolation unless absolutely necessary, but that night the whispers became unbearable. A dozen versions of my voice murmuring all at once like a choir humming through the walls. So I broke protocol. I layered up, unlocked the door, and stepped into the darkness. The cold hit like a slap. But what really stopped me were the boot prints, fresh ones leading away from the station. Not mine, not possible. I followed them, heart pounding, flashlight trembling in my hand. No wind, just the crunch of my boots and the sound of breathing. Mine, I thought. Then I saw it. A figure standing completely still about 30 feet out. Covered in snow, bent slightly forward as if listening. It was whispering nonsense in my voice. Gibberish. Laughing words stitched together in the rhythm of my speech. I took one step forward, and it turned its head. Slowly, unnaturally, without moving its body. I reached out, and the second my fingers brushed its shoulder, the figure collapsed. No scream, no sound. It melted into a puddle of thick black liquid that soaked instantly into the snow like it had never been there. I ran. I don't remember how I got back. I just remember the feeling that something had followed me, matching every step, staying just out of sight. Back inside, I locked every bolt. I pulled up the logs, motion sensors, entry data, timestamps. The door had never opened. There were no prints recorded. No exterior activity, no breach. According to the system, I hadn't left at all. But my gloves were still wet from melted snow, and outside, the boot prints were gone. Only the whispering remained. I found the tapes by accident. A storage locker tucked behind a panel in the utility room marked in thick black paint. Do not watch. The words were smeared, as if someone had tried to scratch them out with a knife. My hands shook as I pried it open. Inside, a cardboard box of VHS tapes, each labeled with dates going back decades. I told myself I just needed a distraction, something to prove I wasn't losing my mind. Curiosity wasn't the right word, it was hunger. I rigged the old monitor and pressed play. The first tape showed a researcher sitting where I sat now, scribbling notes, eyes sunken. He muttered under his breath, rocking slightly, glancing at the door like it was breathing. The next tape showed another man carving shapes into the steel wall, symbols that made my eyes ache just looking at them. On a third, a woman stared out the window for hours, whispering the same word again and again until her lips bled. Then came the last tape. A man in a parka stood by the door, face pale, eyes wild. He looked directly into the camera. "They need a name," he said softly. "Once you hear yours, it's already too late." Then he opened the door and walked into the frozen dark, disappearing without a sound. I stopped the tape but couldn't stop trembling. The walls seemed closer now, humming with a low vibration I'd never noticed before. The generator thudded like a heartbeat under my feet. That's when the radio flickered alive. At first it was static. Then my voice, my exact voice, came through, whispering from the speaker, "Come outside. We're waiting," over and over. My throat tightened. My hands moved toward the door without permission. I yanked them back and unplugged the radio, but the voice kept speaking, faint and breathy, rising from the wires like steam. The station wasn't just old. It was bait, a trap for something buried beneath the ice, patient and hungry, calling people north to feed on their names, their minds, their bodies. I pressed my palms to my ears, but I could still hear it, my own voice, calling me into the snow. People think I'm safe now. They see the city lights outside my window, the noise of traffic, the warmth of a world that isn't frozen, and they assume I've left that place behind. But the truth is I never left it. I carried it with me. It's in my ears, in my dreams, in the silence between words. I tell myself I escaped the station. I boarded the rescue chopper. I came home. But sometimes when I close my eyes, I'm still there, staring at the endless black, hearing my name whispered from the ice. It still knows my name. Sometimes I wake up and it's pitch black, no streetlight glow, no sound from the city, and I hear myself talking even though my mouth is closed. The words are wrong, stretched, like something else is trying them on. I've tried warning people. No one believes me. They think I'm sick. Maybe I am. Just now, as I write this, I hear footsteps outside my door. Slow, deliberate. They stop. 3 knocks. I whisper the only thing I can. It found me again. And from the other side of the door, my own voice whispers back softly, "Open up." If anyone finds this journal buried beneath the snow, don't come looking for me. By the time you read this, I'll either be gone or something far worse. I remember stepping off the last supply plane as its engines roared against the frozen wind, watching it shrink into the endless white until it vanished. That was the last warm sound I heard. Ahead of me stood the Arctic Research Station, low, metal, and half buried in drifts, its windows like blind eyes staring into the dark horizon. Inside, the heat clicked on reluctantly and a faint hiss of static leaked from the radio, as if someone were whispering just beyond the signal. I told myself it was interference. I had arrived just in time for the long night. 65 days of unbroken darkness. No sunrises, no shadows, only the endless hum of generators and the echo of my own heartbeat. I searched for the last report from the previous technician, but the logbook ended mid-sentence, the page smudged and torn. The silence pressed against me like a weight. Alone, I should have felt safe with locked doors and stocked shelves. Instead, it felt as though the station itself were holding its breath, waiting. The days blurred almost immediately. Without a sun to rise or set, time became a slippery thing, measured only by the numbers on my watch and the routines I forced myself to keep. I woke, boiled instant coffee, layered up, and trudged out to the instruments planted like lonely sentinels in the snow. The wind cut across the ice like razors. I logged temperatures, barometric pressure, seismic readings, then trudged back in, stamping frost from my boots, trying to convince myself I wasn't already fraying at the edges. Inside, the station felt even quieter than the frozen wasteland outside. I kept a journal, filling it with neat clinical notes to anchor my thoughts. Day 5 of the long night. Generators steady. No anomalies, but every time I lifted my head from the page, the silence had deepened. It wasn't absence of sound, it was a presence like a lung filling. One evening, while flipping through the last technician's notebook, I found a page near the back smeared with graphite and sweat. It ended mid-sentence. It only comes when the light is gone. I stared at the words until the letters seemed to move. That night, as I drifted toward sleep, I heard it, soft, deliberate crunches on the snow just beyond the walls, footsteps where there should be none. My pulse jumped. I sat up, holding my breath, listening. The sound stopped. The next day I told myself it was ice shifting or a trick of the wind. But by the 3rd night the crunching returned, joined by something worse. Faint murmurs like a radio tuned just off station, bleeding into the edges of silence. They had no source, yet they threaded through the walls and under my pillow. Words I couldn't quite understand but somehow felt were meant for me. I began sleeping with the lights on, though it did little to push back the dark pressing against the windows. The more I tried to rationalize, the less rational it all felt. My routine became frantic, my logs more erratic. Each time I looked out into the endless black, I had the unshakable sense that something out there was looking back, waiting for me to believe. The storm had raged for nearly 30 hours, hammering the station with walls of snow that rattled the windows like fists. When it finally calmed, an eerie hush settled over everything. I suited up, the weight of my parka suddenly heavier, and stepped outside to check the wind turbine on the ridge. The darkness was absolute. No stars, no moon. Only the pale glow of my headlamp cutting a trembling circle through the swirling drifts. The turbine stood crooked against the black sky, blades crusted in ice. As I approached, my boots crunched over something brittle. At first I thought it was cracked ice, but then my beam fell on the pattern. Deep gouges spiraling outward from the base of the tower, claw marks so wide my boot could fit inside each groove. They coiled in a shape that made no sense, like a spiral unfurling into nothing. No animal alive could have carved it. The wind hissed through the turbine like a whisper. I backed away, pulse hammering. Inside, I slammed the door, snow still clinging to my gloves. The lights flickered, dimmed, then went black. The generator kicked in with a groan, but the radio died completely. Static. Dead silence. I reached for the satellite phone, but the cradle was empty. Heart thudding, I searched every room. The station's tight corridors seemed to close in as my flashlight swept across steel walls. At last, in the storage closet behind a stack of fuel canisters, I found it. The phone, its screen cracked, wedged between boxes as though someone had hidden it. And beside it lay something so wrong it froze me in place. A human finger, blackened and rigid with ice, the nail cracked like porcelain. I staggered back, nearly knocking over the canisters. It wasn't a relic of some old accident. It was fresh enough that frost still clung to the knuckle. My breath clouded in front of me. The last technician hadn't simply left. Someone or something had taken him. I held the finger in my gloved hand for only a second before dropping it. Outside, the wind rose again, a low moan threading through the walls, as though the darkness itself were laughing at my discovery. Sleep became a rumor. Every time I closed my eyes, the station seemed to shift. Metal contracting, pipes ticking, a rhythm too measured to be random. At night, the footsteps returned, circling the building with a patience that felt deliberate. Slow, crunching strides in the snow, sometimes stopping right beneath my window as though it knew where I was sitting. I pressed my ear to the wall once and felt a vibration travel through the steel, a heartbeat that wasn't mine. I rigged a camera trap near the door, hoping to prove I was only imagining things. The next morning, I played the footage back and my stomach lurched. At the edge of the weak floodlight stood a figure, tall, impossibly thin, arms hanging like wet ropes. Its head tilted as if listening. Then it moved. Not walked, not ran, moved, blurring forward in a way no human body could. The screen went black. I dragged heavy crates against the entrance, a makeshift barricade. Every morning I found the snow on the roof disturbed. Long trails like something had crawled across on its belly, pressing down the drifts with clawed hands. In the journal's final pages, the last technician had scrawled the word Nernquak, an Inuit legend. The shadow that waits, a being that mimics the voices of loved ones and wears their faces like skins. That night, as the wind howled and my barricade trembled, I heard it, my mother's voice, faint but clear, drifting through the vents. "Please let me in. I'm cold." My throat closed. She's been dead for years, yet the voice was perfect, trembling with the same softness she used when waking me as a child. I pressed my back to the wall, fingers clutching the cracked satellite phone like a talisman. The voice came again, closer now as though it were inside the corridor. "Please," it whispered. "Please open the door." I didn't move. Not even to breathe, I snapped. The next morning, I packed a thermal pack, wrapped myself in every layer I owned, and stepped into the storm. I didn't care where I ended up, anywhere but here. The wind screamed against my hood, biting through my gear like teeth. I pushed forward, compass clutched in numb fingers, trying to move south, just south. 30 minutes passed, then an hour. But when the wind shifted and the blur of white parted, I saw it, the station, right in front of me. I stood there, ice crusting my eyelashes, staring at the same crooked antenna, the same fuel drums half buried in snow. I'd walked in a perfect loop without realizing it. The station had called me back. Or worse, never let me leave. The door was wide open. I knew I'd locked it. My boot prints were the only ones in the snow. Inside, the air felt heavier, like it had lungs. I tore through drawers until I found the journal again, flipping past the pages I'd read before. New entries I hadn't noticed. The last worker had tried to burn it down. Fire is the only thing it fears, they wrote. But it gets inside you first. I found the emergency flares. The gasoline. My hands trembled as I filled a canister. I had no plan, just fear, just raw instinct. That's when I saw it. My reflection in the window staring back at me, but wrong. Off. A half-second delay. It smiled before I did. Moved when I didn't, and then the scratching started again. Long, deliberate drags across the metal walls, like claws teasing a meal. The voice returned, but now it wasn't pretending. You can stay, it cooed. You're already halfway mine. I backed into the corner, flare gripped like a weapon. We can be one. The whisper came from every direction, inside and out, under my skin and behind my eyes. I slammed my palms over my ears, but it didn't help. It was in me now, curling around my thoughts like frostbite creeping toward the bone. I no longer knew where I ended, and it began. I'm recording this in the dark. The flare burned out hours ago. My voice sounds thin, not quite mine anymore. If anyone finds this tape, don't trust any voices you hear in the dark. Don't even trust your own. Lock the doors, but it won't matter. It waits. It always waits. I can feel it circling now. Not outside, but inside, coiling through my veins like cold smoke. The scratches on the walls have stopped. That's how I know it's near. When I glance at the mirror, my reflection doesn't mimic me at all anymore. It stands taller, head cocked, a skinless thing draped in faces like rags. All of them shifting and whispering at once, my mother's, the last workers, even my own. I try to keep speaking, but my tongue feels heavy, my words slowing. It's inside now, I manage to whisper. Then the recorder clicks. Silence. Later they'll come. A rescue team. Faces hidden behind fogged masks, boots crunching on untouched snow. They'll find the station warm, food stocked, every door shut tight. No sign of me. Only the mirror in the hallway tilted slightly, showing not their reflections but something still watching, waiting for the next name to wear. I remember the exact moment my flashlight died. 1 second I was sweeping the beam across the snow-covered path, every breath curling into the blackness like smoke. And then dark. Pitch black, complete swallowing. I smacked the side of the flashlight. Nothing. I was alone in the Alaskan wilderness during polar night where the sun hadn't risen in weeks. The cold wasn't just biting, it was consuming. But worse than the cold were the whispers. At first, I thought it was wind slipping between the trees, but it had rhythm, cadence, words I couldn't make out but somehow felt meant for me. My ears strained in the silence, my heart thudding louder than my boots ever had, and then closer, like breath against the back of my neck. I spun around, blind, arms flailing, but there was only the dark. That endless, suffocating dark. I couldn't see my hands, couldn't see anything. Just a wall of black pressing in, and somewhere inside it those whispers, soft, patient, hungry. I told myself it was nothing, that I'd imagined it, but I'd be lying if I said this was the first time it happened. And worse, I knew it wouldn't be the last. I took the assignment for the quiet. 30 days in Utqiagvik, Alaska during the polar night, logging climate data in a remote outpost with no distractions, no traffic, no emails, no noise. Just silence and snow. As a grad student buried in deadlines and debt, it sounded like a strange kind of paradise. I figured I'd get a few publications out of it, maybe even some peace. But the second I stepped off that rattling charter plane, I knew something was off. The sky was already a deep blue-black like ink frozen mid-spill. The sun had vanished weeks ago and wouldn't be back until February. I watched the plane's lights fade into the distance, the only source of movement in a landscape that didn't seem to breathe. The cold hit different, thick, quiet, full of weight. A silence that felt almost expectant. The locals barely looked at me when I passed through the main station. A woman behind the supply desk handed me keys without a word. An older man muttered, "Don't go walking at night." I blinked, smiled awkwardly, but he didn't elaborate. I tried to laugh it off. Probably just native folklore, right? Isolation-induced ghost stories. I'd read about that. The outpost was 15 miles from town, nestled between hills and empty stretches of snow-packed tundra. No roads, no lights, just a small prefab shelter squatting beneath a sky of eternal night. Inside, one cot, one desk, 2 computers, a backup generator, and crates of rations. Everything I'd need. Nothing more. The silence inside was worse than outside. Not a creak, not a hum. Just the low buzz of fluorescent lights overhead, and that went out every so often, like the place itself was holding its breath. I told myself I'd get used to it. That first night I logged my data, heated a pouch of food, and stared out the window into a darkness so absolute it looked painted on. No stars. No moon. No movement. But as I stood there, spoon in hand, I could have sworn something was moving just beyond the glass. A flicker, a shift, like the dark itself had stirred. I turned away quickly, told myself I imagined it, but I didn't sleep. By the 5th night, the routine had settled into something robotic. Wake up, eat, check instruments, log readings, sleep, repeat. But it never really felt like I slept. The darkness was too deep, too still, and the silence seemed to echo. That night, around 2 a.m., I was hunched over the desk, headphones on, scanning radio frequencies just to feel less alone. The shortwave was mostly dead, as usual, until it wasn't. Static flickered through, low and scratchy. Then, beneath it, something else. Faint. Deliberate. Like someone whispering, too close to the mic. Not words I could understand, but syllables. Rhythmic, steady. I adjusted the dial. Nothing. Shifted again. There. Whispers. I pulled off the headphones, heart suddenly hammering. The sound had stopped, but I swore I could still hear it. Not from the radio anymore, but from the far corner of the room. I shut everything off and stepped outside to clear my head. It was -30. The cold slapped my lungs hard. No wind, no animals, just the crunch of my boots. I stayed there for 5 minutes, maybe 10, until I heard it. Knock, knock, 2 slow knocks on the outpost door. I turned fast, nobody. No movement, no prints in the snow, just the same endless darkness pressing in. I backed away, breath shaking, flashlight darting left and right. Still nothing. And that's when the light flickered, once, twice, then steadied. I stayed up the rest of the night. The next morning, as I went to log the temperature data, something caught my eye. My logbook was open. I never leave it open. And across the bottom of the last page, symbols, etched in a shaky, narrow script. They looked like, I don't know, spirals crossed with teeth. They weren't in any language I knew, but the ink was fresh. I touched it. Still tacky, my pen was on the floor. Cap off, I didn't write that. I know I didn't. I locked the book away and tried to go about the day, but the radio wouldn't stop hissing. The static felt louder than before, deeper, like something behind it was waiting, listening. I didn't tell anyone. Who would I tell? No one was coming back for weeks. That night, the power died without warning. 1 second, the hum of the heater filled the room. The next, it was gone, snuffed out like a candle. Darkness pressed in on me, heavier than it had ever felt. My breath fogged and lingered, refusing to fade. I fumbled for the flashlight I kept on the desk, flicked it on, and a narrow beam cut through the black. The generator had tripped before, but never like this. Never so sudden. Never so final. I pulled on my boots, breath already clouding in the freezing air, and stepped outside. The cold was a living thing, gnawing at every inch of exposed skin. Snow crunched beneath my boots, a sound so sharp it seemed to echo for miles. The flashlight's beam quivered across the empty field over the outpost's edge, toward the squat generator shack. Halfway there, the light dimmed. I smacked it hard. It flickered, steadied. 2 more steps, dimmed again. I felt the air shift like something massive had drawn closer. Then the light died completely. Black swallowed me whole. The whispers surged back instantly, clearer than ever, circling me. My name, soft, urgent, like it was being spoken from inside my own chest. My hands went numb. My legs felt like they weren't mine anymore, like strings pulled by something unseen. Panic roared, but my body moved like it was underwater. I stumbled, gasped, clawed through the darkness back toward the outpost. I don't remember opening the door. I only remember falling inside, slamming it shut, flashlight clattering across the floor. My lungs burned. My fingers burned. I couldn't feel my toes. The heater groaned back to life a few seconds later, like nothing had happened. And then I saw them. On the inside of the window, etched perfectly into the frost, were handprints. Dozens of them. Small, long-fingered, pressed flat against the glass as if something had been waiting there while I was gone. I stared at them, my teeth chattering so hard I thought they'd crack. They began to melt, slow and deliberate, leaving streaks like tear tracks on the pane. Something had followed me in. I didn't dare turn around. I started losing track of time. My watch said 3:41 a.m., but it had said that yesterday too, or maybe the day before. I wasn't sure anymore. Sleep came in pieces, flickering in and out like broken film, and my dreams, if they were dreams, were full of static and soft voices crawling under my skin. That morning, or what passed for morning, I noticed something outside the window. A figure just standing there in the dark, not moving, just watching. He was tall, thin, arms at his sides. I blinked and he was gone. No footprints, no shadow. Just the shape of him burned into the frost like a scar. The whispers had changed. They didn't just murmur anymore, they answered. When I muttered to myself, they finished my thoughts. When I tried to write, they whispered before the words hit the page. They spoke memories I'd buried, things I never told anyone. A girl from 3rd grade I left crying on the swings, the time I lied about my father's drinking. It knew me. I ripped open the outpost storage crates, desperate for distraction, for something real. That's when I found the old journal, water-damaged, pages stuck together with mold and time. The name inside was Dr. Adrian Yates, 1998. The entries were frantic, erratic. He wrote about whispers in the static, about a man outside the window at exactly 3:41 a.m., about symbols appearing in his logs, the same ones I'd seen. He wrote, "It doesn't want the body. It wants the mind. It eats time. It waits until you don't know what's real." His final entry chilled me more than anything else. I tried to warn the next one. If you're reading this, it's already inside. I dropped the journal like it burned. My fingers trembled. I turned slowly to the window. Frost crept along the edge again, a thin white veil. And through it, him. The man watching, no breath, no blink. Just eyes like tunnels, I screamed. But no sound came out. When I turned back to the clock, it still said 3:41 a.m. I hadn't moved. I hadn't blinked, maybe. I never did. I don't know how long I've been walking. My boots crunch over the frozen tundra and each breath feels like knives in my throat. The whispers aren't whispers anymore, they're words. Clear, constant. Speaking in a language I shouldn't understand, but somehow they say things like, "You forgot again," or "It's time to come back. I left the outpost behind hours ago," maybe days. The stars don't move. The dark never lifts. My flashlight flickers with each step, weaker and weaker. But I keep talking. Into the recorder. Into this. In case anyone finds it. I see shapes out here, bodies in the snow that vanish when I blink. I saw the man again, but this time his face looked like mine. I think I've been here before. Maybe I never left. Maybe I'm not the first version of me to walk this path. Maybe there were no versions. Just echoes trapped on repeat. The light's almost gone now. Batteries dying. I hear them behind me, all around me, closer. If someone finds this, please, don't come looking. Don't listen to the voices. Don't believe the dark, static crackles. You were always here. The lights above me shouldn't even be visible this far south, but here they are, churning like green fire across a starless sky. They twist and ripple, brighter than any aurora I've ever seen, pulsing in patterns too precise to be natural. And behind them, God, behind them, something shifts. Something vast, like the outline of a body pressed against a curtain. Every time it moves, the air vibrates in my teeth. The outpost is silent. No generators, no hum of heaters, no radio chatter. Just the wind scraping over the ice and my own heartbeat thudding in my skull. The emergency beacon lies dead on the desk. The light that's supposed to blink steady and red is dark as a sealed coffin. I keep pressing the button anyway, like maybe this time it'll work, like maybe I'm not alone. But I am. I can feel its gaze, even though there are no eyes. It's like standing under an ocean, knowing something huge is circling beneath you. My fingers shake as I reach for my recorder. If someone finds this, if anyone ever hears my voice, they'll know I didn't imagine it. Something's moving beyond the northern lights, and it's looking at me. 2 weeks ago, this place felt like a dream. A solo research assignment tracking auroral activity in one of the most isolated stretches of Alaska. Just me, a radio tower, a weather balloon system, and a month's worth of data to log. I told myself it would be peaceful, a kind of retreat, silence and sky. The bush pilot who dropped me off wasn't much for conversation. Grizzled guy, smelled like diesel and chewing tobacco. Right before takeoff, he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You picked the wrong sky to stare at." Then he was gone, swallowed by the white. At first, it was everything I hoped for. Stillness, clean, dry air, nothing but the crackle of the wind and the occasional pop from the wood stove. But after the third night, the oddities began. My instruments picked up strange electromagnetic spikes, irregular, sharp, almost like a code. At first, I assumed equipment malfunction, then came the humming. Low, steady, and not mechanical. It didn't come from the generator or the tower. It came from everywhere, the ground, the sky, inside my own chest. Some nights I could almost hum back in harmony. Then the stars began disappearing. I'd look up to check constellations and find gaps, black holes where light used to be. Hours later, they'd return, perfectly aligned again. It was subtle enough to dismiss, until it wasn't. I logged it all, filed it under atmospheric interference, but deep down I knew it was different. The wind here doesn't feel like wind. The darkness is too quiet. Even my sleep changed. Vivid dreams of floating above the station, of looking down at myself through green-tinted clouds. I'd wake drenched in sweat, the tips of my fingers numb. Still, I stayed. Told myself it was the isolation, the cold, the lack of sunlight. But sometimes I'd catch myself staring at the sky too long, as if something up there was waiting for me to notice it. And maybe it was the first spike hit just after 2. My sensor array screamed, a sudden burst in auroral. Intensity so high it shattered the calibration range. I rebooted the system twice, thinking it was a glitch, but the numbers held steady. The lights weren't just active, they were alive. When I stepped outside, the sky looked like it was breathing. Green and violet waves pulsed in time, rippling outward from a single glowing point like the center of a spider web. They didn't shift randomly like natural auroras do. These moved in patterns, symmetrical, rhythmic, pulsing like a heartbeat. The wind had stopped completely. No sound, no movement, just light and silence, and then the equipment began to fail. Radios buzzed with static. My laptop shut off without warning. The battery-powered recorder froze mid-log. Every compass needle spun like it was drunk. I thought it was a geomagnetic anomaly, until the receiver pinged. A burst frequency. Repeating. Precise. I ran it through my audio software, filtered the noise. What came out wasn't static. It was tonal, like syllables, rising and falling in a deliberate cadence. It sounded like speech. That same night, I looked up through the skylight and saw something block the stars. Not a cloud. A shape. Huge. Angular. For exactly 7 seconds, the stars vanished in a perfect line. Then gone, I stared at the clock. It read 3:41 a.m. But I remembered checking it at 2:10, and that was only a minute ago. Time had slipped. I began hearing whispers. Soft. Just beneath the wind. My name sometimes. Other times, nothing I could understand, but it knew me. I kept telling myself it was stress. Sleep deprivation. Polar madness. But my instruments never lied, and they were recording things no one had ever seen. Frequencies no aurora should emit. Movements no light should make. I stopped logging entries after that. I just sat by the window at night, staring upward, waiting for it to happen again. Whatever it was. It wasn't random. It was looking for something, and I think it found me. It started with the wind, or rather the way the lights ignored it. One night, gusts whipped snow sideways across the outpost, rattling the antenna, screaming through the cracks in the walls. But above me, the aurora flowed in the opposite direction, smooth, intentional, unbothered by the chaos below. Then came the shapes. Not just waves or curtains, but structures, angles, grids. Once it formed a perfect spiral that hovered in place for over a minute before unraveling into smoke. Another time it stretched into long parallel lines like scaffolding made of color. I grabbed my camera and snapped a burst of photos, hoping to make sense of it later. One shot froze me. A pale green oval flanked by arcs. It looked exactly like an eye. In the next frame, the shape had shifted. The lid was half closed. It had blinked. That night I left the outpost. I had to see the lights from higher ground. Had to confirm what I'd felt growing in my chest for days. I hiked to a ridge overlooking the valley, and there it was. Not in front of the lights. Behind them, a presence. Enormous, slow-moving, stretching across the entire horizon. Not a shape I could describe. Not a being exactly. More like the outline of something older than shapes, its movement barely visible through the curtain of aurora. It wasn't flying. It wasn't even floating. It was just there, unfolding piece by piece like a hand revealing itself from behind a veil. I stood there for over an hour, unable to breathe, unable to move. My heart beat like it was trying to warn me to run, but my legs wouldn't listen. The lights pulsed once, and I felt something shift in my mind. A memory that wasn't mine, a thought that didn't belong to me. And then I knew. It had been watching me since the beginning. Every journal entry, every step outside, every glance at the sky. I wasn't studying the lights, they were studying me. The power died without a sound. 1 second the heater hummed, the instruments blinked, the radio whispered static, and the next, total silence. The kind that presses against your eardrums like deep water. I scrambled to reset the breakers, slapped life back into the generator. Nothing. Even the emergency lights were dead. My last source of communication, the shortwave transmitter, flickered and went dark, like something had decided it was time for quiet. I stepped outside. The sky wasn't above me anymore. It was everywhere. The lights had descended, rippling across the treetops, bleeding into the snow like a curtain of silk and fire. They pulsed in slow waves, not random, not drifting. It was like standing inside a living thing breathing around me. Then came the pressure, not on my body but inside my skull, a slow squeezing sensation, like my own thoughts were being shuffled. My memories flickered out of order, my sister's voice, my first day of training, the bush pilot's warning, all flashing like broken film. And then, I heard my name, spoken in a voice that sounded almost like mine. A mimic, a mirror. The sky opened, I don't know how else to say it. The clouds bent outward, folding into impossible angles, shapes I couldn't comprehend, curves that became corners, dimensions that didn't make sense. A geometry that shouldn't exist hung above me like a blooming wound in the sky, time fractured. I remember floating, though I never left the ground. My body was still, but my mind was unmoored, pulled upward like a thread unraveling. I saw Earth from above, not from space, but from something beyond it where light didn't behave the way it should. I saw cities like pinpricks, oceans like stains. I saw humanity, small, fragile. Dust adrift under a gaze that had been watching long before we knew how to name the stars. And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't a discovery, this was an introduction. They hadn't come from space, they'd always been here. Hidden in the patterns, waiting for someone foolish enough to look too closely. And I did. I came to on the floor of the outpost, mouth dry, nose bleeding, head pounding like I'd been dropped from a height. The lights were on. The heater buzzed faintly. Power had returned without explanation. My instruments were rebooted, blinking as if nothing had happened. But I knew something had. 3 days were gone. My logs skipped straight over them. Food in the kitchen was spoiled. My fingernails were chipped and dirty like I'd been clawing at something. My camera was still recording. I don't remember turning it on, but there it was. Red light blinking, battery nearly dead. I watched the footage in silence, hand trembling. Most of it was static, whispers. My voice may be distorted and layered with something else. At the end, I was sitting at this very desk, eyes wide, mumbling into the lens. If you see the lights, don't look directly. Don't notice them. If you do, they'll notice you. Then I turned, staring over my shoulder, as if hearing something behind the wall. In the reflection of the window, just for a second, something moved. Something massive. I still haven't slept. And the stars. They're not where they're supposed to be. I can still see it when I close my eyes, the way the sky tore itself apart. Not meteors, not planes, not some trick of my tired vision. The stars moved. They slid out of place like beads on a string. Whole constellations twisting into shapes I'd never seen before. It wasn't random either. It felt deliberate, like something up there was arranging them for me alone. Even now I'm shaking. My breath comes short and fast just remembering it. People laugh when I try to tell them. They call it exhaustion, hallucination, isolation, but I know what I saw. The sky itself rearranged. When it first began, I thought it would be the trip of a lifetime. A week alone in a rented cabin outside Fairbanks, far from everything, far from anyone who could tell me to rest or move on. I wanted quiet. I wanted to sit under the aurora and let its green ribbons wash everything clean. The grief, the noise, the years of never stopping. The Alaskan polar night promised endless darkness and undisturbed skies. That's why I came, but some darkness isn't empty. Some darkness is alive. And under that frozen sky, something old had been waiting for me all along. I didn't come to Alaska to be found. I came to disappear just for a little while. After my mom died last spring, I kept moving like I always did, pretending grief was just another project to manage. But I was running on fumes. My friends noticed the tremble in my hands. My boss noticed the mistakes in my work. I didn't notice anything at all. Not really. Not until I caught myself crying in the frozen food aisle, because the song playing overhead used to be her favorite. That's when I booked the cabin. It was buried deep in the wilderness, miles north of Fairbanks. No neighbors, no distractions. Just a crooked little place surrounded by trees and silence. The rental listing promised unbroken views of the aurora, and that's what sold me. I grew up obsessed with the northern lights. I thought maybe if I could just sit beneath them long enough, something inside me might shift. The first few nights were everything I hoped for. The aurora danced in slow waves across the black sky, green and violet flickers shimmering like silk. I'd wrap myself in a blanket, sit on the porch with a mug of soup and stare upward until my face went numb. But then I noticed something strange. One night I was tracing Orion like I always did, and it was off. His belt was too high. The stars too spaced apart. I chalked it up to poor orientation, maybe even the tilt of the Earth from this latitude. But the next night it was worse. The Big Dipper curved at the wrong angle. Cassiopeia had shifted. I checked star maps. I pulled up old photos from the cabin listing. They didn't match what I saw above me. I tried to rationalize it, but every night the changes grew. The stars weren't just shifting, they were rearranging. Lines formed between them that didn't belong to any constellation I'd ever known. Triangles with sharp edges, patterns that pulsed like they had weight, and sometimes they glowed just a little too bright, like they weren't reflecting light, but producing it. I told myself it was stress, grief. But somewhere deep inside I knew better. The sky was watching me back. The last time I saw the aurora, it didn't dance. It just stopped. I remember standing outside, my breath curling in the air, watching as the lights unfurled across the sky like they always did. Green, blue, faint ribbons of red. It was beautiful, silent and soft, like the sky had decided to exhale. But then something shifted. The movement ceased all at once, mid-wave, like someone had pressed pause. The lights just froze there, hung like a painting, unnatural and stiff. At first I thought it was me. Maybe my eyes had gone strange from the cold. But even when I blinked, rubbed my face, stepped back inside and out again, the aurora didn't move. Hours passed. It never changed. That same night I realized the forest had gone quiet. No distant howls, no flutter of wings, not even wind brushing through the trees. The world had muted itself. Then I saw it. A new pattern of stars, one I didn't recognize, forming directly above my cabin. It looked like an eye. A massive, unblinking eye etched into the night. The longer I stared at it, the more certain I became that it wasn't a coincidence. It was staring back. Each night the eye grew. Wider, more detailed. The outer stars shifting until the lashes took shape. I tried to ignore it, to sleep it off. But even inside, I wasn't safe. The old emergency radio I kept on the counter, dead for days, crackled to life. At first just static, then a voice whispering in reverse. I couldn't make out the words, but I felt them. Somewhere in the back of my brain, they rattled loose thoughts I hadn't known were there. Time slipped. Hours vanished. I'd blink and realize I'd lost whole stretches of the day. I started writing things down just to remember where I was, but the notes made less and less sense, like someone else had written them. And always that feeling. That pressure on the back of my neck, that weight between my shoulders, the overwhelming certainty that I was being observed, not from the trees, not from the dark, from above. Something up there had found me. And it wasn't done watching. I started waking up in places I didn't remember going to, Once on the front porch, barefoot in the snow, staring up at the sky. Another time deeper in the woods, curled beside a frozen stump with my jacket on inside out. My tracks led in every direction, zigzags, spirals, some looping right back to the door like I'd been walking circles for hours. Inside the cabin, I'd find mud tracked across the floor, water boiling on the stove, my journal pages torn out and stuck to the walls with tacks I didn't own. Every morning I felt more like a guest in my own skin. The stars began to blink in rhythm, first random, then patterned. Perfect grids of light pulsing across the sky like code. I tried to film it to prove it wasn't in my head, but my camera refused to record. Every file corrupted. Every battery drained dry within minutes. One night I ripped open the bottom drawer of the desk, desperate for something, anything, to anchor me. That's when I found the journal. Old leather, brittle pages, dated 1973. The handwriting started steady, then spiraled into jagged, manic scrawl. The man wrote about sky signals, about losing time, about dreams that aren't dreams. The final page just read, "They open you to look inside." I dropped the book. I was breathing so hard I thought I might pass out. I packed everything I could and ran. The snowmobile refused to start. I ditched it and tried to walk south, compass in hand, landmarks memorized. But the compass spun constantly, pointing nowhere. And worse, the trees never changed. The same dead trunk. The same crooked branch. It was like I was walking inside a loop. Hours passed, maybe days. I'm not sure anymore. But I finally collapsed back onto the porch of the same cabin I thought I'd left. It was waiting for me, like it never expected me to get far. That's when I knew. I wasn't lost. I wasn't stranded, I was trapped. And whatever was above me, watching through that eye of stars, wasn't just observing. It was studying, measuring, peeling me open to see how long a mind could stretch before it finally snapped. The eye pulsed that night, slow and steady, like a heartbeat in the stars. I watched it through the window, every nerve in my body pulled taut. Then something shifted. One of the stars detached, I know how that sounds. But it didn't fall. It drifted, slow and deliberate, like it had a mind of its own. It moved down, not in a streak, but in a perfect silent glide until it hovered just above the treetops, glowing like a cold ember. And I felt it. Not in my ears. Not in my mind. In my bones. A kind of pressure behind the eyes, like a thought that wasn't mine unfolding inside me. It wanted to be seen. Not looked at, seen, fully, completely, without fear. The trees leaned toward it. I swear to God, the whole forest shifted. Not from wind, there wasn't any, but like the branches were bowing, worshipping. I stepped outside. My legs weren't mine anymore. I don't even remember putting on shoes. The cold didn't touch me. The snow didn't crunch beneath my feet. The only sound was my heartbeat and that thing, hovering like a second moon, watching me come closer. Then it spoke. Not aloud. Not exactly. But I heard it clear as anything, right behind my own voice. "You've seen too much." It sounded like me. Hollow. Distorted. Like it had been practicing my tone until it almost got it right. I should have run. But I didn't, I couldn't. That light, it was beautiful. It wasn't harsh or blinding. It was warm and perfect, like stepping into the moment before a dream begins. It poured through the trees, and for a second I felt weightless, unafraid. Then everything tilted. The light twisted. The trees around me stretched upward, their trunks bending in impossible arcs. The ground rippled like water. The star blinked again, once, twice. Then darkness swallowed everything, and in that final moment before I lost time again, I had one last thought. Quiet, buried deep beneath the fear. Maybe the stars didn't come for me. Maybe they came to open the sky. They tell me I was gone for a week. I remember none of it. One moment there was light pouring through the trees, and the next I was stumbling down a frozen road. Clothes torn, skin blistered from cold, and something else I can't name. My eyes burned for days. Even now I keep them downcast, afraid of what I'll see if I look up. In the hospital they asked questions. Endless, careful questions. Where had I been? What had I seen? I gave them nothing. How could I explain that the sky itself had turned into a living thing? That it had looked back at me? They nodded, wrote hallucination and exposure trauma in their charts, and called in a psychologist. Astronomers visited once, curious about my story. They smiled politely when I refused to meet their eyes. The stars don't move like that. one of them whispered to a nurse. But I could tell their certainty was brittle, because the last thing I saw before they took my phone away was a live stream from an observatory. Constellations twisting, familiar shapes breaking apart, letters forming out of pinpricks of light. The stars are shifting again, and this time they're spelling something. I don't remember how long it's been since I last saw the sun. Days, weeks? I've stopped trying to count. Time doesn't work right here anymore. Nothing does. This town, Halbrook, used to have people. Used to have noise. Now it's just me. I'm the only one left. I think one morning they were all just gone. No screams. No blood. Just empty houses, still warm coffee mugs, car doors left open in the snow. Like everyone stood up mid-thought and vanished into the dark, and the sun never came back. It dipped below the horizon that evening and never rose again. The sky turned to ink and stayed that way. The clocks froze. The air went still. The world forgot how to move forward. At first, I tried to make sense of it. Keep a journal. Mark the days. But the ink began to smear before I finished writing. Pages went blank overnight. I can't even remember my own handwriting now, or my name. I say things aloud just to feel real, but the words don't sound like mine anymore. If you're hearing this, or reading this, I need you to believe me, because something in the dark is remembering me. Even if I can't, before all this life was quiet. I worked as a seasonal supply manager in Halbrook, a half-forgotten mining town tucked between frozen mountains and long stretches of nothing. There were maybe 40 people left by the time winter set in. Most had moved south after the last mine shut down, but a few of us stayed. We had routines, rituals. Check the generators, restock the dry goods, keep the roads clear enough for the monthly supply chopper. It was simple, predictable. The last normal day started like any other. Cold coffee, diesel fumes, a soft orange glow through the blinds as the sun made its brief arc across the sky. I logged inventory, waved to old Mr. Halverson as he passed on his snowmobile, and caught Sarah from the diner stacking crates behind the back door. It was cold but peaceful, the kind of quiet you learn to appreciate out here. Then around noon I noticed something strange. The silence had changed. It wasn't just quiet, it was hollow. No rumble of engines, no voices over CB radio. The snowplow sat idle in the lot, driver's side door swinging open. I walked through town calling out. No answers. Just open doors, half-eaten meals, coats left hanging by the entrances like their owners had simply stepped out for air. But they hadn't. There were no tracks in the snow. No signs of a struggle, just absence. I knocked on every door, searched the diner, the clinic, even the chapel that hadn't held a service in years. Nothing. Everyone was gone. By the time night came, I was alone. The sun dipped under the hills in a soft red smear, and I told myself I'd figure it out tomorrow. Maybe there'd been a gas leak, maybe a silent evacuation I'd missed. I tried to sleep, but the next day never came. The light never returned. The sun should have risen for at least a few more days before full polar night. But it didn't. The horizon stayed black, and I've been here ever since. Walking streets that don't echo anymore, opening doors that never lock, whispering names that no longer belong to anyone. At first, I tried to hold on to time. I marked the inside wall of the general store with chalk, a fresh line each morning. I kept busy, followed a routine, cooked meals, swept snow from the porch, even though no one would see it. I told myself if I could just maintain structure, I'd be fine. But the chalk marks started to blur. One morning, if you can even call it that, I found 5 lines smeared into one long gray streak. I couldn't remember making them. Couldn't remember anything from the night before. Then the clock stopped. All of them. Wristwatch, oven timer, even the old grandfather clock in the post office lobby. All frozen at 3:14 a.m., no ticking. No blinking lights. Just silence. I opened a can of peaches that had expired 5 years ago. They tasted fresh. My flashlight has been on for, I don't know how long, weeks. It should have died days ago, but it stays lit. The food doesn't rot. My body doesn't ache. I don't feel hunger. But something's changing. My reflection isn't mine anymore. The first time I noticed it, I was brushing my teeth in the mirror above the sink. I moved, it didn't, it just stared. Its eyes looked too wide, too knowing. Now I avoid mirrors, and the shadows. They don't behave like they should. When I walk past a street lamp, mine stretches the wrong way. Sometimes I see shapes flicker along the edges of buildings. Not people, not animals, just outlines long and slow like they're dragging something behind them. At night, if you can call it night in a place where night never ends, I hear footsteps in the snow. Crunching, stopping just outside. I never see anyone when I look. But I feel watched. Not just watched, studied. I found the mayor's old calendar in his office. The pages won't tear off. The date is stuck on the day they all disappeared. I've tried burning it, burying it, shredding it. It keeps coming back. Same page, same date. I don't know how long I've been here. I don't think time works here anymore. And worse, I don't think I do either. I started seeing them a few days ago. Figures in the street, silhouettes in windows. At first I thought the others had come back, that maybe I wasn't alone after all. But they weren't people. Not anymore. They stood too still. Never blinking. Never breathing. Just frozen shapes in the fog. Like mannequins forgotten in doorways. And when they did move, it was wrong. Jerky, like something inside them was learning how to use a body. I saw one standing behind the diner counter where Sarah used to work. Same height, same apron, same tilt of the head, but her mouth stayed open too long when she smiled. And when she spoke, her voice was hollow, empty. Cold coffee, just like always, it said. But I never drank coffee. Another one waited outside my building. He looked like Halverson, the snowmobile guy. Same parka, same beard, but he didn't wave. He just stared. Then he began reciting memories I hadn't told anyone. You cried when your dog died in 4th grade, he said. You buried her behind the house. You never told your mom. My stomach turned cold. I walked toward him demanding answers. But the second I reached out and touched his arm, he crumbled. Just collapsed into ash that scattered in the wind. After that, they multiplied. Now I see them all over town, just standing in places where people used to be. They never blink. They never speak unless I get too close. And when they do, they speak like they're trying on voices, mine included. I heard one whisper my name last night. My real name, the one I haven't said aloud in weeks. I tried hiding in the firehouse basement, but even there I heard their footsteps overhead. Slow, rhythmic, like they were waiting for me to move. They don't come in daylight. I know that much, but there hasn't been daylight in, God, I don't know how long. I think they're not just mimicking people. I think they're becoming them, or maybe replacing them entirely. Maybe they already have. Maybe I'm the only thing left here that remembers being human. It started with a sound I hadn't heard since this all began. A bell. Not a chime, not digital. A real bell. Slow, hollow, old. It rang 3 times, low and deep, echoing through the frost-bitten streets like it was inside the bones of the town itself. There's never been a church in Hallbrook. No steeple, no bell tower. I've lived here long enough to know that. But I felt it, this pull in my chest, like gravity had shifted. Like something was calling me. I followed the sound to the edge of town, past the collapsed fishing docks and frozen trees that hadn't moved in weeks. That's where I found it. A hole. Wide and perfectly round. Too perfect. It hadn't been there before. I would have remembered. It was surrounded by symbols carved into the ice and stone, markings I didn't recognize but somehow understood. They reminded me of things I'd seen in dreams I couldn't fully recall. Curves that made my teeth ache. Shapes that whispered when I looked at them too long. The bell rang again. This time from inside the hole, then came the voices, dozens, maybe hundreds, echoing upward like wind through a canyon. Help us. It's cold. It remembers. You were always meant to come back. I heard Sarah's voice. Halvorson's, my mother's, my own. That one hit hardest. My own voice floated up from the dark, warped like it had been dragged across ice. Come down. You belong to it now. I stepped closer, toes at the edge. My breath fogged the air, but the hole didn't steam. It didn't seem cold. It didn't seem like anything, just open. I thought about jumping, about ending whatever this was, about finding answers or maybe just peace. The whispers promised it would stop if I did. The forgetting, the watching, the hunger, but something stopped me. A flicker of instinct, a sliver of me that still remembered who I was before the night. I backed away and the voices screamed. Not words, just rage. The ground trembled, the air cracked, and the bell rang one last time. I haven't eaten in, I don't know. I haven't felt hunger in longer than I can remember.
Haven't slept either.
Not really. I close my eyes and the dark behind my eyelids feels no different from the world outside them. My name is... No, it's gone again. All I know is that I was someone once before the town emptied, before the sun vanished, before the hole began to whisper. I've written this over and over, scratched it into wood, typed it into machines that don't hum anymore. Each time I finish, it disappears. Maybe this time will stick. Maybe someone will find it. Maybe you're reading it now. If so, listen, something is here. It feeds on time, on identity, on memory. It doesn't want to be understood. It wants to become. I thought I was the last, but just now I heard it. A voice behind me, close, breathing. You're not the last, it said. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Because suddenly there were no walls, no town, no stars, only the dark, and in it, something smiled.